Hello, everyone. Good evening, Erev Tov. Welcome to the seventh lecture in the Paris Center's lecture series of Peace and Innovation in Isolation. Shalom v'chadshanut b'bidud. My name is Yarden. I'm Deputy Director General of the Paris Center for Peace and Innovation. Super excited to be with you today. These are special circumstances, so excuse any dogs barking or any neighbors knocking. Natural noises for time of self-isolation. Sarah, are you there? Looking forward to seeing your pretty face.
Hi. Hi,
Hello.
Yardena.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So good to see you. I'm so
Good to see
happy
you
that
too.
you're here. So Sarah, you speak 3 languages fluently, right? So Hebrew, English, and French.
True. Yes.
So I thought we should quickly explain to all of our viewers why we are doing this lecture in English. So obviously, we want to create some special and unique content for our English-speaking viewers. Very, very important. But second of all, is because now we have a group of young leaders from Israel and all across the Middle East, part of our YaLa Young Leaders program, who are joining us to listen to you talk about storytelling and to participate. So hi, everyone. So happy that you're with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining.
And just a quick intro, Sarah, about who you are, and then the floor will be yours. So Sarah is a peace activist. She's a storyteller. She's a dialogue facilitator. She's been working with youth and adults in peace building and education in Israel and Palestinian Authority for the past 9 years. She was also part of our family. She was project manager and blog editor for YaLa Young Leaders for 5 years, developing and running a citizen journalism program. She has been involved in multiple peace and cooperation programs, organizing conferences, working as a dialogue facilitator, and training peace program educators. Today, she works for several peace organizations, including the Arava Institute and Jerusalem Peacebuilders. So Sarah, so excited that you're here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very nice introduction. And I'm very happy that you mentioned the potential dog barking on your side, because you might see a cat walking right on my laptop eventually. She made a point of doing that for every workshop I've run online so far. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to have such a diverse audience. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So as Yardena said, my name is Sarah, and I'm obsessed with stories. I love storytelling, and I love helping people share their stories. And it all began when I was a kid. First of all, I was a bookworm, and I think a lot of you here can relate to that. I just loved disappearing in a book, forgetting everything that was happening around me, and just jumping and drowning into a story and imagining the characters and the atmosphere and whatever was the landscape in the story. And it allowed me to travel, but from my bed. And growing up surrounded by the stories, I also loved the stories my parents would tell. And I'm sure that many of you have found yourself sitting at a dinner table with your parents or your grandparents, and suddenly someone will start telling a story about their childhood, about what they could do when they were younger, or what actually they couldn't do when they were your age, and then begin a story. And stories are absolutely everywhere. When a journalist shares a story with us, he will call it a news story. This is how they get our attention. This is how we follow what is happening. When a commercial wants to be a good commercial and grab our attention, they actually will turn the commercial into a story. You even have companies that understood that so well that from campaign to campaign, they will reuse the same characters as if we were following their story. Because our brain, our human brain, remember stories better than any other facts. When a raw fact is turned into a story, then we remember it better. Why? Because we are connecting to the characters, we are connecting to the story, and we can almost each time create a little movie of the story we hear in our mind. That's how powerful the human brain is. We can create entire movies based on the stories we hear or we read. Growing up, I was living in France, and I was asked once by a little boy, "What are you?" I was going to school in a Christian school. I was the only Jew, and apparently to many people it was weird. And when I heard this kid asking me what I was, I realized that something was definitely odd about me, because everything I was doing, eating, the music I was listening to, the places we were going on vacation, what I was doing on vacation, all the things that to him made sense, to me was different. And the only way for me to enter this little boy who asked me, "What are you?" and not "Who are you?" was to go back home and to ask my family how I ended up being born there, how I ended up being called Sarah Benazera, having very dark hair, long ago, dark eyes, and going to a Christian school with my brother who's named Eyal. How did we end up there? And the answers were never simple. And every single answer I received was a story on how my parents were born in Algeria, like my grandparents, and how from war to war, from conflict to conflict, we ended up there in northern France. They were stories of hope, they were stories of pain, they were stories of courageous people who were there before me. And I found it incredibly inspiring. So I went back to school and I started telling those stories. And that's how I became a who. That's how from a what, I became a person. Because people could connect. That's what stories are for. They are there to create a special connection between us, the storytellers, and our audience, which is why when we tell a story, we always need to keep our audience in mind. The great and wonderful and talented Maya Angelou, who was a poet, a writer, a dancer, a singer, an activist, said once, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, people will never forget how you made them feel." She was a wonderful storyteller, of course, and she understood the power of stories, that stories are about emotions, that it's about what is the most human in us, how we feel. Because through stories, through sharing my experiences, you will understand how I feel, but I will also make you feel the same emotions. Through stories, you can laugh, you can cry, you can have hope. And hopefully we will explore how to do that together today. And first of all, I'm very happy that you all came here. It proves that you maybe had the feeling that stories are more than just a before bedtime activity for children. It's really an amazing tool to make our world bigger, to create connections, as I said, but it can also be a good tool to heal, to learn, and to expand our world. And right now, in our unique circumstances, I think that we all need to do that, especially this week, as many of us are getting ready for Easter. We Jews are getting ready for Pesach, and in a few weeks it will be Ramadan. And we will all have to find new ways to celebrate those very special holidays. And storytelling can actually be a great way to tackle this unique way we will celebrate those holidays this year. So hopefully you will have many stories to share during those holidays with the people around you, but also maybe online, and that's what we will do together. So as I told you, I believe that stories are here to help us expand our world, connect, understand things better, but also heal. And I had the honor, as Yarden said, to work for many years with YaLa Young Leaders. And with YaLa Young Leaders, we would bring people from different backgrounds, Jews, Muslim, Christians, Arab and Jews from all around the Middle East and North Africa. And the only way to bring people together in a way that allows every voice to be heard, in a way that allows people to feel safe was to share stories. We are 100% stories. This is what I believe in. The stories we hear, the stories we read, the stories we are taught, and the stories we live make our point of view on the world absolutely unique. All the stories we've heard, read, or lived since we were born created a set of lenses in front of our eyes. So we see the world, we analyze and understand the world through this unique set of lenses that was created by the stories we went through. So every single person has a unique set of lenses, which means that we all see the world in a different way. We all have different references. And when we bring people from so many different backgrounds, so many different countries, it's important to share stories so we understand how other people see the world. Because if the news stories you read are different from my news stories, if your grandparents' stories are different from my grandparents' stories, of course we will see the world differently. And it doesn't mean that one has to be wrong and the other right. It just means that we need to add different sets of lenses in front of our eyes if we want to understand how the world works and if we want to create a strong connection with people around us, not only people who look like us and who have very similar set of lenses. And luckily, I got to see that it works. And I'm very excited to have brand new students of YaLa Young Leaders here with us today. So what I would like you to do for the next 20 minutes or so is to help you tell your story. You can write it or you can record yourself, but I will give you tools to use language to tell your story. And as I said earlier, the story is about the connection that you are creating as a storyteller with your audience. And I believe that it's always more interesting to imagine your audience as different from you as possible. If I was telling a story about my grandmother to my brother, I wouldn't have a lot to tell him because he knows how unique and wonderful my grandmother is. And he would probably already guess the end before I had to tell him. But if I had to tell you a story about my grandmother, first, I would describe you her apartment with, in little corners, the leftover wallpaper from the 70s. Big flowers with very weird colors that maybe were not the colors in the 70s, but that's what I got to see. I would tell you about the little box of candies she would always keep in the living room for us. I would tell her about her beautiful eyes. I would tell you about her smile. I would tell her about the sofa she was always sitting on. And I will describe to you the family pictures on the wall. I would also tell her she had Alzheimer's, and so that sometimes she didn't always remember things in the right order. So when I'm thinking about my audience, I need to make sure that I'm giving the context. So before you write or before you tell your story, always think about your audience and always assume that your audience doesn't know anything you know. Remember that your normal is only your own normal and familiar because you have this specific set of lenses, but your audience probably doesn't. So help them create this little movie that they will have in their head while you tell your story. So creating a story is, as I said, creating this connection and making sure that your audience will have all the elements necessary to imagine a little movie in their head. And when you create your story, first of all, you need to understand and to decide for yourself, why am I telling this story? Is it to share something about my family? Is it to create a connection with people I haven't seen for a while? Is it to pay tribute to someone that is no longer with us? Is it to heal, something that I want to do personally? Or maybe it is to travel. And right now we all need to travel, even though we can't move. And stories are the perfect tool to allow us to travel without moving from our living room. If you describe your story correctly, people will travel with you. And while you remember your story, you will also be traveling. So, creating a connection, thinking about your audience. Now, any good story also has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I know it sounds a little silly, but if you remember well, I'm sure that you've been in situations where someone was telling a story and you had no clue where he was going with it, and maybe you didn't even understand it was over. There's nothing worse than not understanding that a story is over. It's also very confusing when you don't see the direction of a story. Life is messy. Stories in real life rarely have a real beginning and a real end, but as a storyteller, you get to decide when the story begins and when it ends, because that will be the frame of your story. And when you tell your story, when you write your story, make sure we see the evolution from beginning to end with something happening in the middle. So the time frame of your story is important. Another thing that is very important when you tell your story is your characters. Think about your characters like you would in a movie. People need to get attached to your characters, but they also need to understand who they are. If there are more than one character in your story, you will need to give some details so we don't get confused, right? Because if you say, so I was talking to this guy, and then so the other guy came, but then the first guy, it will all just be very confusing. So give names to your characters. And here we're talking about probably people you know, stories from your own experience. So tell us how old these people were, maybe how old you were, because you might be one of the main characters. Describe them to us. Maybe we want to learn about what they were wearing. Maybe it will tell us something about them. So think about your characters. So we said story is about creating a connection between you and your audience. So always think of your audience and give them enough context and details so they can really jump into your story, even if they come from a different background. And create a set of characters that people can imagine. So don't be afraid to give details about your characters, their age, what they look like, and of course, their names. Then you will also want to make sure that in your story, we have the setting. Where was it? Was it outdoor? Was it indoor? Depending on if you live in Morocco or if you live in Israel, in the north or in the south, or if you live in a city or in a village, all the things, the setting will be very, very different. So make sure you allow people to really travel with you and give them the details. Where was it? Was it a house, an apartment? Were there things on the wall that would help picture the atmosphere? So the characters and the settings are also very important, and they need some descriptions. The last time is, when was your story happening? Because if it's about you, you might want to give the context of how old you were, and maybe it was also linked to something bigger happening in the world at that time. So you might want to give the historical or time context of your story. So as I said, stories are there to help us connect. Sometimes they can help us heal. And right now, they really can help us travel. And hopefully, when you will work on your story, you will be able to travel through your memories, through time and space. And the people listening to you or reading you will hopefully do the same. And if you want to make sure that your audience connects with you in your story, and if you want to make sure that your audience travel and has a little movie in their head, make sure you give the right details so they can understand your world and the context, maybe the cultural aspect of your story that wouldn't be clear for everyone. Make sure that your characters have names and that we can imagine them. Make sure that we know where the story is happening, that we can imagine the setting. Remember that we also, you also need to say when it was happening. And of course, think about why you're telling the story. What is your message? And storytelling is an amazing and powerful tool. As I said, it creates connection, and sometimes it can even bring people back to life because we miss them, and telling a story about them just brings them back. And stories can be so powerful that they can also motivate people to change their life or to take a specific action. Right now, as many of us might feel lonely or disconnected, your story can actually help other people because they will feel connected to you. And also, maybe you can use a story to help people, maybe help others by sharing their story, maybe by donating to an organization you believe in, maybe a story to check on your neighbor, to check if they're okay, or maybe a story to help you check on your family members who maybe need more phone calls right now than usually. So through stories, because it's about emotion, it's about our humanity. And we can use stories for motivating people to become activists at their level. And right now, if you feel that people need more support, more help, a story can help you actually say that. It's a lot into a story, but that's how powerful this tool is. Again, because stories are about what makes us human, and a lot of things can connect us. Emotions, and also desire to make the world better. And I really believe that if we share more stories, if we expand our world by reading more stories, hearing more stories from different contexts, from different people, we can really have an effect on the world. We can change the way we look at the world. We can add lenses in front of our eyes, and we can have a better understanding on the things happening around us. So before we move on to the conclusion of this little workshop, I would like to guide you through an activity so you can already decide which story you will want to tell. So take a pen and a paper if you can, but you can also do it with your eyes closed. First of all, you need to understand that a story needs to be very specific. If in a couple of weeks someone asks you, so how was the isolation time? It's a lot to tell. It's a lot of days. It's like when someone asks you after a trip, how was it? Where to begin? Or when you go travel abroad and you come back and people ask you again, how was it? It's a lot to answer. It's a lot to think about because you have all those different experiences. The best way to share an experience is first to decide on this little moment that will say more than you think it will. We cannot tell too much in a story in terms of time. We're not going to cover a month in isolation or 10 years of your life. But sometimes one moment will be powerful enough that it gives a good image of that time period. So right now you will start thinking of a moment that maybe brought you joy. Think about a happy memory. Maybe think about a holiday you spent with your family. Or maybe the last time you thought you would spend the holiday with your family, but maybe you didn't because something happened, life happened. Maybe you want to tell or to think of a story you heard as a child, because right now you're missing your family. So try to think of a specific moment with a beginning and an end. You will decide where you put those. Go back in your memory. Think on one memory that makes you smile. Maybe it's a holiday memory, maybe not. And when you have this memory, catch it in your mind well. And now I want you to think. Go inside your memory and think about what you see. What did you see at this moment, at that place? What did the landscape look like? Were you indoor, outdoor? Was there nature around you or not? You can close your eyes to try to visualize things around you? If I was telling a story about my grandmother, I would imagine the apartment I described to you earlier. The flowers on the wallpaper. So do the same. When you have your memory, think about everything you saw and write it down. Now think about what you heard. Were they nature noises? Were they people screaming? Was it a restaurant with a lot of cutlery making noise? Were there voices of people you knew in the background? What did you hear? When you have those memories with you, when you wrote down eventually what you could hear, I want you to think about what you could feel on your skin. Was it hot? Was it cold? Were you sitting on a comfortable sofa? If it was outdoor, maybe it was grass under your feet, or mud, or sand. Try to think about how it felt on your skin or under your feet. So you thought about what you saw, you thought about what you heard, and you thought about what you felt. Now, did you smell anything? If it was outside, maybe there was a smell of fresh grass, or maybe you were sweating and you could smell that. Was there smell of delicious food cooking close by? Or maybe of city pollution because it was in a street? Think about it. Were there some strong, powerful smells? Can you even remember? Or maybe the perfume of someone you liked? And what did you taste? If it's a holiday memory, chances are you were eating at some point. So maybe you want to share with us the flavors of the food you had in your mouth. Was it sweet? Savory? Was it tasty to you or not? Or maybe you were thirsty and you could feel it in your throat. What did you taste? And finally, after you've remembered what you saw, what you heard, how it felt on your skin, what you smelled and what you tasted, I want you to think about how you felt inside. What was the emotion you felt when you were living that story, when you were inside that memory? Was it joy, excitement, fear? And how do you feel today thinking about it? What are those strong emotions that this story brings back to you? Because those are the emotions you will want to share with your audience. So you can now come back to us. So you've all been traveling through time and space right now, remembering this moment in your life. And I hope you enjoyed it, first of all, because we can't really travel a lot right now. And I also hope that you will be able to use all those tools in your story. So I also would like to give you a little example on how we could incorporate these elements that I just gave you of the senses into your story. So right now, I'm getting ready to spend Pesach by myself, which is very unusual. I'm usually always with my family. We are 30 around the table, and we will read the entire story that we read for Pesach in the Jewish tradition. And it usually lasts about 2 hours. And my cousins and my uncles and aunts and my father, we are all sitting along a very long table. And we pray, we sing, we make jokes. This is my usual Pesach. This year will be very different, as it will be mostly me and my cat. I'm sure she will be a great entertainment, but it will be different. But this situation reminded me of another very unusual Pesach I spent a few years ago, because I had to travel to Rwanda for work right during Pesach, Passover. And I was very nervous at first because it was the first time I wouldn't be with family in Israel or in France for this holiday. And not only that, I would be working in Rwanda and I would be by myself, which was a little bit overwhelming, but I was very, very excited about traveling to Rwanda. Part of it was because going to Rwanda in Africa was for me a way to learn about the reconciliation process that Rwanda went through after the genocide in '94. And as a peace activist, I was very interested in that. And it would be my first time traveling for work on something so important. So I was very excited. But the other reason why I was so excited and nervous even was because I would get to see gorillas. Since I'm 7, I am obsessed with gorillas, mountain gorillas to be specific. I think that they're the most beautiful creatures in the world. I find them fascinating, and I love everything about gorillas. And I knew that there would be gorillas in Rwanda. So I find myself 12 hours after landing, it's the middle of the night in my hotel, waiting for a jeep to come pick me up at 4 a.m. in the morning. Because I know we will have 4 hours of driving in the mountains of Rwanda until we reach the nature reserve where gorillas are. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, of course I cannot sleep. And I'm thinking about how crazy I am to put myself in that situation. Nobody knows where I am. My cell phone will not work. I'm just getting on the jeep, inside the jeep of someone I've never met in Rwanda, traveling through the mountains. So 4 a.m. arrives, the jeep arrives as well, and I get into the car and I meet my guide, Patrice. Patrice is the most charming man you can imagine. He is very friendly. He's smiling. He's about my age. He introduces himself right away and shakes my hand, and I feel safe. Patrice and I start talking. We realize we were born around the same date, that his brother is the age of my brother, my sister is the age of his sister. But it stops there because Patrice lost his family in the genocide, his parents, and he raised his brother and sisters. So we get to speak about our families and why we're here, what he's doing, what he does, what I'm doing, what I do. And we have this amazing 4-hour conversation while looking at the sun rising on the beautiful, green, luxurious mountains of Rwanda in this little jeep. After 4 hours, we finally reach the nature reserve, and I'm told that I belong to this group of tourists and that together we'll now go on a hike of 3 hours to go see gorillas. I don't know if any of you ever had a dream that came true, but it's an overwhelming feeling. It's touching something that you thought was a dream for your entire life. Since I was 7, I dreamt of seeing gorillas, and there I was, almost 30 years later, 25 years later, about to see gorillas. And we started to hike. I hadn't slept. Of course, I hadn't slept the night before. Oh, and of course, I remind you, it's Pesach. And I wanted to keep Pesach. So I only had Pesach food in my bag. So I had brought matzah from Israel and also all those Pesach cookies that are very, very, very dry. That's all I had in my backpack. Because for those who don't know, during Pesach, traditionally, Jews don't eat fresh bread and also things that have risen, so fresh dough. So everything is kind of dry if you follow that tradition, which I usually do. So for 3 hours, me and this group of tourists following our guide, we're hiking in the mountains of Rwanda. It's all about vegetation. It's luxurious. I'm sliding in mud most of the time, trying to grab branches so I don't fall. And there is no path. There is no like real road for us to follow. We're just, into the vegetation, and it's sliding because it's very humid. There is mist everywhere. So my hair is totally wet just from the humidity in the air. But I'm ecstatic. I couldn't be happier. During every break, I'm eating my very dry, sweet Pesach cookie. And I don't care. I find it the most delicious thing in the world because I'm in Rwanda about to see gorillas. And we were warned that we were not supposed to get too close to the gorillas because we actually could bring them some, diseases they don't have. But also because they're used to have their own life. We should not interfere with them. So as we're getting closer, we're also getting more nervous and more tired because most of us haven't slept a lot and we've been hiking now for 3 hours. Suddenly, one of the guides tells us that we're getting close. And I can smell this powerful smell of fermented vegetation, which I thought smelled amazing, which actually was the smell of gorilla poop, I was told later. But I thought it smelled amazing. So we're still walking, and I'm on, at the beginning of the group, because of course. And suddenly the guide stops me and says, "Stop, Sarah, don't move. Slowly, please, turn around." So I froze. I could hear my heart beating inside my chest. I could feel the sweat dripping along my face. I just moved around without shaking, without saying a word. And when I was done turning around, I realized that about 30 centimeters away from me was a gorilla, that she was just happily sitting on a bush, chewing on a branch, not impressed or intimidated by me or the rest of the group that was further down the hill. And that's how I saw a gorilla for the first time. I looked at her. She was the most gorgeous creature in the world. I could see her beautiful fur, very dark and shiny. I could smell this mix of smell of humidity, vegetation, mud, and fermented bamboo that they were eating. And I just couldn't stop crying, but in a very quiet way, because I didn't want to disturb them. And that's how I spent Pesach a few years ago. This story first reminds me that no matter how we celebrate a holiday, we can always make this day special in one way or another. It also reminds me that depending on the context, very dry, not interesting food can taste delicious. It also reminded me that as human beings, we all can and we all know how to adapt to different situations. And that's what we're doing right now. We're adapting to a brand new situation. And because now you will have a mission, you will have some homework, I would like you to think of a moment that you will turn into a story that you will share on the Facebook page of the Perle Center. I want you to think about the story you will pick. Again, maybe it will be a story to remember good times with your family. Maybe it will be a story to tell what you're going through right now, because not everyone is going through the exact same thing. Maybe it will be a story about an unusual situation you found yourself in, and this story will inspire everyone, reminding us that we can all overcome weird situations. Or maybe it will be the story of a travel, of a trip. So you will all allow us to travel with you while we're stuck at home. Stories are incredibly powerful, and they are enjoyable both for the storyteller and for the audience. So I hope that you will enjoy using the tools I gave you today, thinking about all those elements to use as like building blocks when you will build your own story. And I really hope that people will read your story, react to them, and you will see that story has its own language. A story brings another story. I'm sure that when I told you the story about my grandmother at the beginning, it brought to your mind stories about maybe your grandmother, or maybe ugly wallpaper. When I told you a story about a dream coming true, maybe you had a story about a dream coming true that came to your mind. Stories have their own language. They speak to each other. So hopefully, the more stories you share, the more stories you will see being shared for you to read and to enjoy. So thank you very much. This is all for now for our little workshop on Storytelling 101 and how to use this time we have to connect no matter what, because we need it more than ever. And I really invite you to write your short stories on the Facebook group in Hebrew or in English or even in French. And I will be more than happy to give you some feedback and then to share them with as many people as you can and just to see where this goes. So thank you very much. Yarden?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That was so significant and so moving. We've got a lot of comments and a lot of questions. So before we go to the questions, just a few comments and see what everyone has been saying. So Suhail, just so you know, like all of the lectures, everything's going up on our Facebook page. כל ההרצאות עולות לעמוד הפייסבוק של מרכז פרס. So don't worry. You can see it there. Daphna, it's okay, no worries. Better late than never. It's fine that you were late. Michael commented that this is a compulsory lecture for any budding tour guide or storyteller or someone who wants to connect with people. Just so you know, your guys are here. So Shema from Marrakesh is sending hearts and smileys.
Oh,
Mushrik from Iraq, Shirhan. They're all here sending you love on this page and on the YaLa page as well. So for a few questions, so quick, short, concise answers so we can answer everyone's questions. Efrat mentioned that she loves the psychological aspect of storytelling. So I'll link that to Shai's question, which is, how do you use this method of storytelling specifically in context of conflict and of peace building? How does storytelling and telling my own story connect between me and someone else who I may even be in conflict with?
So thank you for the question. It's actually what I do on a daily basis. It's using stories to bring people together and to create empathy. Now it's not a magical tool that you're doing it. You share a story with someone from the other side for half an hour and it works. No, it's actually a process. Because first we have to understand that the stories we believe in, the stories we lived, the stories that make our identity are constructed, and that they only belong to us. And when we understand how complex identities and narratives and stories are, we can see of our own narratives and identities are. We can see the same complexity in the other. And if we acknowledge how complex we are and how our own narratives are constructed based on stories, then we can start looking at the other side as an equal and as a real human being. And it's beyond just, oh yes, you're a person. It's understanding the emotions that all those stories that create their different narratives create and generate. I understand better what your fear is. I understand better what your hope is. I understand more what your identity is and why it is so important, because you told me stories. And through stories, I felt those emotions, and I can see bridges between my stories and yours. So it's a process, because it's also a personal process of understanding our own identity through stories, and then reflecting and being a good listener.
So, there's the saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I guess a story is worth 1,000 bridges in that case.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
So Shai is asking, I think, a technical but a very important question. She's asking, sorry, not Shai, David. He's asking, what makes the difference between a good story and a bad one? Do you need to be an author, a good writer to tell a good story?
So I don't think you need to be a good author. You need to be a good person, which means that you need to be ready to listen. To be a good storyteller, you need to be a good listener, which means that you need to be humble. And I think that good storytellers are humble in the way that they understand that their truth is not everyone's truth, and that they describe their story and their experience in a very humble way, not in a way that wants to impose their truth on everyone else, but just in a way that offers a different way to look at things. So, practice makes perfect when you tell a story, and getting feedback from an audience is always good. It always goes with being a good listener and being humble.
Humility is always a good attribute to have in any case, I think.
Yes.
But it's a good bridge to Anna's question, who's asking, did you ever tell a story that was misunderstood?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we learn from our mistakes. And this is why it was many years ago, I was very frustrated with a group. I was doing a training and I was with a group, and I was very frustrated with the group who was not exactly welcoming of me, being an Israeli Jewish peace activist. And I was the only Jew of the group and the only Israeli. And I was quiet for most of the training because of that. And at the end, I decided to tell my story. And I thought I gave enough context, and I thought people would relate, but they didn't, because they only saw my stories through their set of lenses. Because I was an Israeli, so I was seen as a threat. And my story didn't change enough that, or didn't expand their view on that enough. And I think they were not ready to listen, and I was not patient enough, and I think I was not careful enough, or maybe not even, I wasn't explaining myself well enough, also because I was coming from a place of frustration. So yes, it doesn't always work. And that's why also I said it's a process.
And that links really well to Vida's question. He's asking, would you ever change the ending of the story according to the person you're telling the story to?
I think you change a lot of things depending on who you're telling the story to. I wouldn't change, the ending exactly. Like, I wouldn't change the fact that at the end of the Rwanda story, I didn't get to see a gorilla, because, that's just lying at this point. And storytelling is about telling your truth. But if I had more time, I would give you more details on what I did in Rwanda. If I'm talking to a group of Arabs and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis, I will tell you more about the reconciliation work that took place in Rwanda that I learned about, and how I linked it to my dream coming true of seeing gorillas. So you craft your story. I mentioned building blocks about characters, time, context, and you kind of play with those. And sometimes you put more of the characters because you want to, put more emphasis on them. So of course, be flexible with your stories depending on the time, but also, of course, your audience.
And a final question, kind of to wrap it up, or maybe give us all an idea or additional tools in this time of the global pandemic and everyone being at home. We have the opportunity to tell our stories, but we also have a lot of different platforms. So Nola is asking, what is your preferred social media platform to tell a story? Would it be a blog? Would it be a video piece? Would it be a post on Facebook? Would it be a picture and a caption on Instagram? What would your preferred platform be to tell a story, now that that's the platform that we have?
Yes, which is a very, very good question that has so many answers, because it depends on who your audience is and how old your audience is, but also how old you are and what format you use for your story, if it's written, if it's photos, or if it's videos. So I work a lot with teenagers. So it already puts me in the group of old people very quickly, because I use Facebook. So I know that on Facebook, my audience will be between 30 and more, but I will not get the teenagers I'm working with. No way. I'm very surprised Sharihan came, because she's very young, and kudos, I appreciate that. And if I want to tell my story also for my teens I'm working with, I will craft a slightly shorter version of my story for Instagram. Because I can go long on Facebook, I cannot on Instagram. And I also might put a different image on Instagram because I know that will what grabs the attention. On Facebook, you see the text first and the image after. So the title or my first sentence on Facebook are very important. That's how I grab people's attention. Also, the language I use, if I'm going to write something both in Hebrew or in English. And on Instagram, the image comes first. So I will take a more powerful image and I will make the text shorter because Instagram doesn't allow you to write as much, and also because younger people tend to read less. Then depending again on your audience and what you know about your audience and your age, you might prefer videos on YouTube or on stories on Instagram as well.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all of your experience and expertise and giving us the tools to tell our stories. And I invite everyone to write up your story, tell your story, build bridges and connections, and even peace now with people all around us. Let's take this social isolation and create a platform to connect between people and countries and communities. So Sarah, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Good to see you.
Thank you, Yarden. Very good to see you too. Thank you for everyone who stayed and listened, and really use this time to, as Yarden said, build bridges, because this is an experience to understand that we don't need to be in the same room or in the same city or in the same country to create connections with people. We can do it because, the fairy internet is here to help. And you have this amazing tool that is storytelling. So I hope I will see stories posted on the Facebook page of the Paris Center. And I will be more than happy to give you some feedback. And I hope you enjoyed the hour we spent together and that you will enjoy crafting your stories.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.